We are live.
Yeah. So this is the conference committee on H.449, which is the retirement pensions. Without citing the whole name, that's what it is. And we have three conferees here from the House: Representative Gannon, Representative Sarah Copeland-Hanses, and Representative Rob Leclerc, and three from the Senate: myself, Jeanette White, Senator Collmore, and Senator Polina. So, and we also have with us our wonderful legislative council. Well, we have our staff with us also. Now we have Becky Wasserman, who drafted the bill and has been with us all the way from the very beginnings, I suspect, in the House to today. So, committee, I haven't, this is an odd way of doing a conference committee, I must admit, with doing it virtually like this. It feels odd, but I think unless somebody has a better idea, I think the best way to start here is to have Becky walk us through the differences, if that makes sense. Does everybody think that's the way to start off?
Yes.
Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wonder if it might be helpful, before we get too deeply into it, to figure out the next time we will be able to get together.
That is an excellent point. Let's try and block off some times before we get into it and lose track of that. Okay.
Like this afternoon.
I'd like us to meet this afternoon, you know, whenever we can safely assume we'll be done in committees.
What is your schedule like this afternoon in the House?
I think we could be free anytime after 2 o'clock.
We have something from 1:30 till 1:45, and then we're done.
All right. So should we try to meet at 2 o'clock?
That would be great.
Does that work for you, Becky?
I am scheduled in another committee. I can try to make myself available from like, I'll rearrange. How long do you think you'll meet?
I really can't say how long we would meet this afternoon. We can start the discussions. I would say an hour anyway.
Well, if the Senate agrees to our version, it could be very quick.
I was just
We were hoping that you would see the
Representative Leclerc.
I might be able to do like 2 to 2:45. I just have to rearrange some things. So I
okay, that would work with us, and then I think that we can continue conversations. So if we need to. Okay, thank you, Senator Collmore. That was a very good suggestion.
Thank you.
He's always full of good suggestions. All right, so Becky, and you sent out two documents. One was what you prepared for the House, and then the other one was the differences.
Right. So Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel. So I had done a side-by-side to present to the House GovOps Committee, just as a sort of general overview of what the differences were. But the document I sent out this morning, I think is just, maybe we can work off of that because it's just more specific to the, you know, what was passed, the language that was passed in the House versus the language that was passed in the Senate. And I think that just might be more helpful for the committee to start off with, if that works.
I think you're right. Does everybody agree? Does everybody have that document?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Do you want me to share this screen, or are you able to just look at what you have?
I have it here. I prefer not sharing the screen, just because then we can't see each other if somebody has a question or whatever.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm looking at a secondary device as well. That's why I'm in the witness protection program.
We know that. Who are you?
What have you done?
That's the question.
Just to do with cannabis.
Oh,
You're such a rebel.
all right, so I think
Great.
we will all work off our own either devices or pieces of paper. And all right, great, thank you.
Okay, so so I'm going to start with section 1, which is in both versions of the bill. It's the amending the chapter in Title 3 that creates the Vermont Pension Investment Commission. And there's a couple sections of law in this chapter, so I've highlighted which sections there were changes to. So the first section is section 521, the definition section. And the change here was to the definition of independent. In the House version of the bill, it lists whether a person is independent as whether they have a direct or indirect material interest in a plan, but it also includes if the individual's spouse, parent, or child is a beneficiary of the plans. And that was removed in the Senate version. So it's just based on the individual's being a beneficiary of the plans. The next change is to the membership in section 522. The House version has the membership of the commission at 10 members, and it includes the Commissioner of Financial Regulation. The Senate version has 9 members, and it removes the Commissioner of Financial Regulation. In the House version, there is language with respect to term limits. So in both versions, there's staggered 4-year terms with a cap of 3 terms. The House's version says that an alternate's time serving does not count towards that total cap of a member's term limit. And the Senate's version provides that a single term served as an alternate does not count towards a member's total term limit.
I have a question around that. Sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I'm just curious to know what your motivation was behind that as far as making that change and having that time count.
Well, you had that none of it counts, and what we heard is that alternates usually spend 1 year as an alternate and then get placed on the board. And we just felt that we wanted to make it clear that a single term, if somebody's an alternate for 4 terms and then they go on the board, that might be a little bit too long. So we just wanted to make it clear that one term as an alternate wouldn't count against their term their term limit as a member.
But any subsequent terms would
Well,
count.
if they were an alternate for more than 1 term, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And then the next change is with respect to the appointment of an interim chair in the case that a chair is not able to serve. So an interim chair in the House version has to be a financial expert or independent. In the Senate version, the interim chair has to be both a financial expert and independent. And then finally, with respect to the chair, the House version has a 20-year term limit for the chair, and there's financial expertise training, but there's no requirement that they meet those definitions of financial expert or independent. And in the Senate version, there's removes the chair's term limit and requires the chair to be both a financial expert and independent.
Done.
Why would you remove the term limit for the chair?
What we heard was that there's an independent study of best practices being done this summer, and we decided that instead of setting a term limit right now, we would wait until that best practices study came back, and they might say the term limit should be 4 years or nothing or whatever. That was our motivation.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So then moving on to section 2. This is the section that sets is the transition of terms for the commission members. So it sets the initial term limits for the new members on the commission and the transition period for members currently serving on the commission. So the change in the Senate was just removing the new member term reference for the Commissioner of Financial Regulation, since that position was removed in the Senate version.
Sorry, I have a quick question.
Representative Leclerc.
Why did you take that position out? Did you feel it just didn't add any value, or just curious?
Well, we tussled it around, and we understood that when you first started, you had the Secretary of Administration or the budget person. And then just looking at who might be the most appropriate, we didn't feel that the DFR commissioner wouldn't have anything to add, but that the DFR commissioner could either be a gubernatorial appointee or could serve as an expert witness working with the board.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
Okay, Becky, you are.
Okay.
Okay.
So section 3 of the bill is a reporting requirement for the commission for some reports due in fiscal year 22. There's a small change in this section. As was mentioned, the commission would be hiring an independent consultant to look at best practices for the commission. And there's a reference in that section to the commission being a standalone entity, and it was changed to independent entity.
Okay.
There are no changes in sections 4 through 9 of the bill. So that brings us to section 10, which is the section that creates the task force.
Senator White.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Representative Gannon.
So before we get into the task force, I thought it would just be good to understand the process that the task force is to undertake and understand the Senate's view of that. And Senator White, I know you were on the Retirement Commission that met in 2009. And so just to understand the process, I mean, what is the role of the task force? Is it simply to develop recommendations? Or is it going to negotiate with the unions? Should it negotiate with the unions separately? I'm just trying to get the Senate's view on that.
Well, I believe that we thought that the job of the task force over the summer and fall was to come up with recommendations for the best benefit plan and going forward that would meet the needs of the sustainability of the system itself, and make those recommendations to the General Assembly. And then the General Assembly is the one that will make the decisions about whether the task force came up with the right structure or not. I don't think that I don't see it, and I don't think our committee sees it as, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Senator Collmore and Polina, but I don't think our committee sees it as negotiating with the unions, but rather a task force that's working together to come up with the best benefit structure. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I mean, and that seems to be consistent with what happened in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
There seemed to have been a negotiation after the commission made its recommendation with Senator Shumlin and Speaker Smith and Treasurer Spalding, and I think at least the NEA. And then there was a bill presented in the General Assembly. So is that your recollection?
I don't remember that there were negotiations that happened after the committee met in the summer. I know that the recommendations came to the General Assembly. The way I look at this is the task force will come up with their best recommendations and present those to the General Assembly, and the General Assembly at that point, I'm not sure that I see any role for negotiations after before the General Assembly makes some decisions, but I might be wrong. And I think that's something that can be fleshed out during the process.
Well, I think if we were to change vested benefits, that may entail negotiations with the unions.
Oh, I'm sure it would. I just don't know that you would, until the General Assembly makes a decision based on the recommendations from the task force, you wouldn't know what to negotiate because you wouldn't know what the General Assembly was going to propose.
Okay.
But it could kind of all be happening at the same time. Senator Polina?
Well, just to be clear, the negotiation that would take place would not take place within the task force. It might take place afterwards, when it's in General Assembly and come January or later than January. It wouldn't be the task force that was doing negotiation.
Right. Yeah.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I just got a delivery. Thanks,
Necessary
Becky.
at this time of morning.
It is.
Okay. So section 10 is the task force. The first difference is the makeup of the task force. The House version has 3 House members, 3 Senate members, the director of the Retirement Division, commissioners of financial regulation and human resources. There's also 3 members appointed by the NEA, 2 by the VSEA, and 1 by the VTA. The Senate version reduces the legislative representative to 2 House and 2 Senate members. There's the Secretary of Administration, the State Treasurer, and then it's the same with respect to 3 members appointed by the NEA, 2 by the VSEA, and 1 by the VTA.
Okay. Yes, Representative Gannon.
Two questions. The first is, who chairs the task force? I read this part of the bill 3 or 4 times and could not find the chair.
Actually, I think that we didn't. I believe that you had that the House and Senate members would co-chair. Yes. I don't think we changed that. I thought that stayed in, but if it didn't, that was probably an error. We didn't have any problem with that. So if it didn't stay in,
I
it was
believe
just
that
an
stayed the same, but let me just double check.
Yeah.
I couldn't find it yesterday, so.
Okay. If it isn't in there, it was an oversight on our part.
And then my second question is, why the change in the makeup of the task force?
Well, first of all, we felt it was a little too big. And we wanted to strike a little bit more of a balance between plan participants and non-participants.
Okay.
And we went through about 400 iterations of it, as I'm sure you did also.
So the chairs on page 19 of the Senate proposal amendment, the members appointed to B1A and B, which are the House and Senate members, shall elect a co-chair.
Thank you, Becky. You're right.
So let's stick on this point for a few moments, because I'm trying to understand why you were leaning towards the Secretary of Administration and State Treasurer.
Well, we felt that the Treasurer's office needed to be there, and you had the Director of Retirement in there. And what we heard was that this time period is the worst time period of all for the director of retirement. It's because something like 400 or 500 people are retiring, and so the time constraints on that position, and then that the treasurer would represent that, and that the director of retirement would be available for input at all times or when needed. And we chose the Secretary of Administration. It could be somebody else, but we chose that because we felt that was a very powerful voice for the governor. We wanted somebody that really represented the governor and the administration, and felt that that was probably the most powerful voice to represent the governor. Is that your remembrance, Senator Collmore and Polina?
Yes.
Yeah,
And also
And again,
keep in mind that the retirement division director and the commissioner of financial regulation, whatnot, they're always going to be available for input and to testify before the task force. Their voices will certainly be at the table. They just didn't, the Secretary of Administration seemed like the most high level, powerful voice to provide.
Yeah. We could appoint the governor himself. All right, Becky. Any more questions about that, about why?
So the next section that was changed is the powers with respect to the powers and duties of the task force. So some things were added and removed in the Senate, and some were just sort of combined. So I did my best trying to make sense of that. But the first power and duty and the House side was setting a pension stabilization target that was aimed at reducing the unfunded liability and the ADEC by an amount that was equivalent to the increase from the fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 22 valuations for the state employees and teachers' reports from June 2020. So that was replaced in the Senate version with looking at recommending strategies to lower those numbers, both the ADAC and the unfunded liability, by sort of referencing that same amount, but in a slightly different way. And I just have to pull up the exact language here. So, it was looking at by between 25 and 100% of the size of the increases from fiscal year 21 to 22. So more of a range of that increase as reflected in those two reports, while maintaining the 2038 amortization date. Some things that were added on the Senate side that were not in the House side were identifying potential options for limiting the growth in the ADAC to no more than inflation, assessing the impacts associated with any modifications to the current amortization schedule. In both the House and Senate side, there was a reference to based on benefit and funding benchmarks, the task force was going to look at proposed benefit structures that would evaluate the shared risk model for, on the House side, it was just for employee contributions. The Senate added in for employer contributions and to employee contributions as well, and cost of living adjustments, and that had a focus on reducing any future increases to the unfunded liability. The House version looked at, with respect to the proposed benefit structures, providing an estimate of the cost of current and proposed benefit structures on a budgetary pay-as-you-go in full actuarial accrual basis. The Senate side removed the reference to pay-as-you-go for that estimate. So it's just budgetary and full actuarial accrual basis. The let's see what's next. There was a reference in the House side to creating a plan for the health benefit design innovation, state regulatory measures, and alternative methods of providing pooled healthcare benefits. That was a duty of the task force on the House side. The Senate side, the Senate version removed that and placed it as a responsibility of the new oversight committee, which I'll get to in the next section. The House version looked in terms of OPEB funding. There was looking at a plan for pre-funding OPEB benefits with an evaluation of using federal funds to the extent permissible. The Senate version added to this looking at how to a plan for pre-funding OPEB, and that would include identifying long-term impacts of pay-as-you-go funding. Then some additional tasks were added on the Senate side. There was an evaluation of the intermediate and long-term impacts of the state and local economies because of any proposed changes to current benefit structures and contribution characteristics and their potential effects on retiree spending, including retirees. I'm sorry, actually that might have been removed. That is a mistake there. Oh, no, that wasn't. At some point that was discussed, including retirees who identify as female and retirees who are persons with disabilities. And then they also added in an examination of current benefit structures that look at recruitment and retention of public school educators and state employees. The House version has the task force having the administrative, legal, and technical assistance from the state treasurer, fiscal assistance from JFO, and committee support services from legislative operations. And the Senate version says that the task force would get fiscal assistance from JFO and the state treasurer and committee support services from ledge operations. In terms of hiring outside consultants, the House version had JFO contracting to hire an independent benefits expert and legal advisory services, whereas the Senate version authorized both JFO and Ledge Counsel to do that contracting, and it was more specific to outside actuarial benefit and legal expertise.
So, Representative Gannon has a question.
All right, just backing up a little to page 17 of the Senate proposal of amendment, where it says the task force shall not make recommendations on adjusting the assumed rate of return. The House version also had in that the task force shall not make recommendations on adjusting the assumed rate of return or changing the retirement benefits for members of the state employees retirement system and the state teachers retirement system who are current retirees or within 5 years of the current retirement age.
My apologies, I missed that in the differences. I can add that to the table.
No, that's all right. Well, so my question is, why did the Senate delete that second part of the sentence?
Because that specifically tells them where they shouldn't change benefit structure at all. And we felt that they should be a little more flexible. And if the task force comes to the conclusion that there should be some changes to the for people within 5 years or 10 years or whatever, we just wanted them to have a little more flexibility in their recommendations without boxing them into that.
Representative Leclerc has his hand up.
Oh, you have your little yellow hand up. I'm sorry. Okay. Representative Leclerc, thank you.
I'm just trying to follow the rules here.
Um,
Just going back up a little bit in the bullet point here where it talks about examining the effects of the current benefit structures and contribution characteristics. Would I be able to, and I shouldn't use this word, but I will, make an assumption here that having a discussion around defined contributions would be or could be part of that conversation?
it could be.
Okay, so there's nothing that would exclude, that or a hybrid model or something. In other words, everything's on the table. Perfect. Thank you.
So then the final change, and I'm sorry, I missed that one. I will add that in. The final change in this section is with respect to the reporting requirement. The House Pass version had a report to the House and Senate GovOps committees by September 15th. And the Senate version has an interim report by October 15th and a final report by December 2nd.
Yes, Representative Gannon.
So just backing up to the Joint Fiscal Office being able to contract for independent experts. There was an appropriation in the House version, and that's been taken out. Is that because it's in the big bill, or? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think when I see this section, I want to come back to the first question that Representative Gannon asked about how do you see the workflow of this task force, and what do you feel is the intention of having an interim report in October and then a final report in December, and then, as I think Senator Polina said before, that there would be a negotiation after the task force in order to bring something to the legislature. So just help me understand how you envision running this task force.
By everybody putting all their thoughts on the table and just beginning to hash it out. I don't know any other way of looking at it. I think that our thought on the timing was that an interim report would give some sense to legislators and plan participants and the administration about the direction that was where the task force was going, and with the ability to make comments and weigh in on the general direction, and then with a final report in December. And I may completely misunderstand the way this happens, but if the task force comes up with recommendations that meet or options for recommendations that meet these criteria, I'm not sure, and maybe Chris can help me here, but I'm not sure that there would be negotiations before the legislature actually makes a decision about what the benefit package is going to be. If they're going to be making negotiations after the task force makes a recommendation, why would we even have the task force? Why wouldn't we just tell them to start doing their negotiations right now and come to the legislature with their solutions? I guess I don't understand that. Chris, could you help me out on that?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Roop, Joint Fiscal Office. That wasn't the specific reason why I raised my hand, but okay. I just wanted to weigh in that, if you don't mind, that I think that the Senate committee received testimony that the FY21 valuation studies for the pension systems will not be available by September 15th. They will be available by December 2nd. So I believe the Treasurer's Office testified that those reports are typically produced in November. So that would give the task force an opportunity to look at the latest data and then, perhaps make revisions to the interim report that may be the latest data may require. And I think there was also some testimony that the September 15th timeframe, given the scope of work involved and the complexity of the work and just the way things happen in the summer, felt a little on the aggressive side.
Thank you. I do remember that now. I forgot that, but. So
Representative Leclerc has his little yellow hand up.
Well,
I'm
just
sorry.
that I'm not taking it personal, Senator. But
Thank you.
to follow up on kind of your statements, Jeanette, I have to say I share some of the very similar feelings here. I'm looking for this task force, or expect this task force to be a bit more than just advisory here. If they come to an agreement and the recommendations that they are making, I don't know exactly how I'm looking to say this, but they need to be much more than just advisory here, because if they are only advisory, then this task force really is just a waste of time.
I actually am surprised to hear myself say this, but I think I agree with you.
Well, I was agreeing with you first.
The task force may come up with like 2 or 3 options that the legislature will, but hopefully they'll come up with very limited and specific recommendations, because you're right. If we were going to have them just give some advice and then have the administration negotiate with the unions, why don't we just eliminate the task force and have them start those negotiations right now? So, yeah.
Thank you.
So I would be curious to understand from the perspective of what the Senate committee heard, just around this issue of having the extending the date of the task force so that you have the valuation study for this year. What information did you predict you might get out of this report that you think is critical to influence the outcome of that it felt necessary to delay till December?
Oh, I don't think that was the main reason we delayed. I think the main reason that we delayed was the fact that getting it done before September was an impossible task, because the number of meetings that would have to be held before then were, people have lives, and we felt that that was asking an unreasonable devotion to this issue, and for any member that's on it, not so that was our main reason. And then when, as Chris said, the treasurer weighed in and said that those reports will come in and they might be helpful. They might not offer any additional information that's needed, but they might give some additional information. But our main concern was because the way we looked at this is that nothing will happen in terms of legislation until January 1st anyway. So why make it due in September? And then you have September, October, November, December, almost 3 months where it's just sitting there and we can't act on it anyway. That was our main reasoning. If that's helpful. Okay, any more questions on that right now? Okay, Becky, do you want to?
Sure. So the next change is in section 11 of the bill. In the House passed version, this was some authority to ledge council to make conforming revisions in the statutes to account for the change from the Pension Investment Committee to commission. There's no change to that language, but it was moved to section 12 in the Senate version because there was a new section 11 in the Senate version that created the Joint Legislative Pension Oversight Committee. And that committee was not created in the House version. And then the same thing with the effective date that was in the section 12 of the House passed version, and it was moved to section 13 in the Senate version, and it's the same effective date of which is on passage.
Any questions about that?
Well, briefly, why?
Why what?
Why the creation of this new committee?
We felt that the retirement system it's a huge issue, and it needs more attention than just two standing committees that can give it a little bit of attention during the legislative session. That it really requires ongoing, a dedicated body that is just looking at that, just as we have justice oversight. It requires a body of legislators that are going to take that on as their primary responsibility and then report back as justice does to the standing committees. But if you look at what the government operations committees have to deal with in general, every session, this is just one part of it. So we felt it important that this is a huge enough issue. And it may be that in 5 years or so, we don't need the oversight committee at all. But right now we feel we do, to make sure that we don't end up in this kind of situation again.
Okay. Was the discussion around like having the VPIC board report to this committee and then the other subsequent boards as well?
Yep.
And
I think that's in there, but I am not exactly sure. But the way this was modeled after kind of the other oversight committees that we have, and they are always asking for the appropriate people to report to them. So the treasurer's office would be reporting, VPIC, the other boards.
do you envision this oversight committee, for lack of a better way to put it, having some veto powers and say if there was, I mean, in other words, are they going to be looking at benefits as well? And if there was a proposed change of benefits, would they have the ability to raise an objection? Or is this just totally, again, sort of an advisory?
Oversight committees have no authority to do anything. They can report back to the, if they're, first of all, it doesn't start until 2022. So it's after the task force is done. But if VPIC and the other boards and whoever came to in their reports to the oversight committee suggested that we might want to look at this change in benefits, they would come back to House and Senate GovOps because they have no authority
Okay.
to do anything.
Okay.
They would report back to these two committees and appropriations and any other committee that.
So they're just there to kind of monitor.
Yeah.
Okay.
And take suggestions and really be focused on retirement on the retirement system. I see Chris unmuted himself and has his little yellow hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to highlight again the point I tried to make earlier that, a lot of the annual reports that come out on how the pension fund's been doing come out when the legislature's not in session. They tend to come out in the fall. So I think the Senate committee did take some testimony that I think one of the envisioned duties of this oversight committee would be the designated group of folks who are tasked with reviewing and really understanding and really picking apart what is going on from fiscal year to fiscal year in those reports. Because when they're issued and the legislature is not in session, it's not always clear who's paying attention to them or how carefully they're paying attention to them.
Not to say we don't pay read every word of every report that comes out,
Of course not.
but this group will certainly have to, because this is their only responsibility. Okay. So we are due back, we're due on the floor in 10 minutes. We're meeting at 2:00 this afternoon. I guess what we will hear is some of the thoughts from the House Committee on, or the House conferees on where you want to go.
I expect you will.
Okay. Any other questions for Becky while we have her here about what's in here and why we might have done something, or for us of why we might have done something? All right. Thank you.
It's been a pure pleasure for you to spend time with us.
Yes, and I apologize, and I will pay much more attention to your little yellow hands, because we only have 5 committee members, you know. We don't use
Right.
little yellow hands.
Well, our Madam Chair, we have to raise our hand in committee.
Well, we do too, but we do it this way.
Ah.
But I will pay much more attention from now on.
So I've been wanting to ask, is it really yellow? Because on mine, it's blue.
You
Oh,
can change them.
oh,
Mine is flesh colored.
This is
What
not
you-
interesting. Yeah, mine's blue.
I don't even have one.
I think you need to update the latest Zoom version in order to get hand colors.
It's not on my priority list right now.